In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, these brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, Brian Fry, Chad Robinson, Dustin Melbartis, Lizzy Haynes, and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Welcome, all you lords, ladies, and knights to the Retro Movie Roundtable, the podcast where we watch movies and then talk about them. I'm your host, Chad Robinson, and joining me today is my good friend and spooky movie co-host, Lizzy Haynes. Lizzy, how you doing?
Yes. Hi, I'm excited to be here. And you know what? I am starting this new tradition where I am just bringing every single member of my family onto this podcast, and I absolutely love it. I started with my husband and my dad, and now I have my brother, my older brother, Ellis, from Lexington. Hi, Ellis.
Hey, happy to be here. Thank you for having me on.
So excited. He is also, Chad, you and I are like the resident spooky people, but I have to really give the credit to Ellis because I don't think that I would have been a spooky fan if it not been for him. So I give all of the credit to my love of horror to Ellis.
Well, that is an awesome brother. That is great that you can indeed, yes. All right. So Ellis, here at the round table, we like to have a couple warm-up questions before we get into what our movie is going to be for the night. So Russell prepares them for us. Russell's a great guy for this. What is a movie you would like to see adapted into a television series that has not already been done?
I just saw Dune Part 2 in the theaters, and I thought it was pretty good, but although the story of Dune is not that complicated, the world in which Dune is set is marvelously complicated. And I think that that's the kind of thing that you took, like, the quality of the first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones, you could give that kind of treatment to Dune, and I think it would be, at least for me, the greatest television of all time.
Okay, we're going to Arrakis and letting the spice flow.
That's exactly right.
Maybe I'll finally like Dune if it's in a television series. Brian Fry, please don't come after me. Lizzy, what are you turning into a serialized TV series?
I chose Silence of the Lambs. It's one of my favorite movies. I know that there's been several movies done, and then they've even done several prequels. But I think there's so much there that you could really dive into. They made all these prequels diving into Hannibal's character, kind of how he became the way he became. There's options for that. But then I also think Clarice herself is a really interesting character, showing kind of those beginning pieces of the nightmares that she used to have on the farm that were then later psychoanalyzed by Dr. Lecter. I think that there's just a lot of meat there that could really be explored in a show, or Buffalo Bill even. I mean, there's so many options.
Oh, I loved Red Dragon, so I'm on board for that. More Silence of the Lambs.
Yes.
I think I'm going to go with Gremlins. I just feel like there's kind of endless hijinks that these creatures could get into, and I would watch every minute.
Who doesn't love a Mogwai? I want one so bad.
Oh my goodness.
That's true. Get a gizmo for Christmas.
Yes.
Right. Ellis, what is the last movie you saw? It doesn't have to be in theaters.
The last movie I saw is Wish. I have 2 small kids, and so we watched Wish on Disney Plus over the weekend. I thought it was pretty good, kind of a return to form for Disney. Not the best Disney movie, but enjoyable, and thought the music was pretty good.
I haven't gotten to that yet. My wife took my daughter just for a mommy-daughter date, but she liked it. So your kids liked it?
Oh, yeah. I don't know that it will replace like Frozen at the top of their Disney rotation. That one's going to be hard to unseat. But they did watch it twice in a row, which is usually a pretty good sign for them that they like it.
Oh, nice.
Awesome. Lizzy, what movie did you watch last?
So the movie that I watched last in full, I attempted to have everybody watch A Little Princess tonight, but that was an epic fail. Nobody appreciated it. It is an unsung hero of movies. So the last movie I watched in full was Sleeping Beauty, which also is a very underrated Disney movie, if you ask me. It's great music. It's fun for boys. They love the dragon.
Like the original from the
Mhm.
40s. Oh,
Yeah, like the Hail to the King. There's
Yeah.
some really, really cute music in it. I love it.
it's from the golden age of Disney. Yeah,
Yes.
totally.
I have not revisited it. I did not like the dragon when I was little. It terrified me. So
Oh,
I
I
was
think
out.
you'd like it.
I was out. Prince Philip, is that his name?
Mhm. Yep.
Okay. The last movie I've watched, I've been on a weird religious nun/horror. So I watched Immaculate earlier this month. I just saw the First Omen, and
Oh, nice.
I wish I hadn't seen Immaculate before it because I feel like it's too similar in a lot of its themes of bodily autonomy and religious issues. So I see one or the other, not both, I guess, or at least space it out, because I just felt they were very similar. I do like The Omen though, and it's interesting. It's gruesome in ways that Immaculate wasn't, and vice versa. Immaculate is, I think, the harder watch.
Now, is this the original Omen or the 2006 remake of the Omen?
This is the 2024 like prequel. So
Oh, did they make a new one for the Omen?
they did, yes. Yeah, this is Damien's origin story, I guess.
Interesting.
Ooh.
Talk about Lizzie and I, we used to, we'd watch horror movies all the time, and she's laughing because there's a line in the original Omen movie where it's this moment of great seriousness where the priest is explaining to our hero that he needs to go to the old city of Jezreel in Jerusalem, and he needs to seek out this wise man who's going to help him understand the secrets of Damien. And the music is very intense and it's very serious. And the camera zooms in on the guy and he says, "Go seek out old man Bugenhagen." And this is the way that I can make her laugh. I just have to look at her and make the word Bugenhagen, and she can't handle it because it's the most ridiculous, unintentional laugh scene you've ever seen. All the tension evaporates out of the scene the second the guy says the name. It's remarkable.
He's so earnest. It's so makes it
He's so serious about it, but the name is ridiculous.
Chad, do you remember when I texted Ellis? I texted Chad or in our like group chat for the podcast, and I was like, "Hey, have you seen Immaculate yet? Because I really want to see it, but I'm a little afraid. So I feel like it's something you'd want to watch." And Chad knows my line of like, if it gets too much into like a religious blasphemy, then like it's just a line I don't like to cross. And he was like, "Yeah, you don't need to see this."
The religion is less the problem than other things with that movie, although religion is the heavier focus in The Omen. Speaking of bad lines, I had to get this one out of there. I'd watched the Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2. It actually has
a sequel.
Yeah, they're making a third one.
Oh,
wow.
The second one has the line, "It's pooing time," and is still better than the first one. The first one is like one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life.
That's amazing.
But we're going to talk about good movies tonight. Lizzy, yes. What movie are we doing?
We're doing 2001's Session 9.
That's right, starring David Caruso, Stephen Gevedon, Paul Guilfoyle, Josh Lucas, Peter Mullan, and Brendan Sexton III. We don't have a budget for this movie. I have to imagine it's an incredibly low budget. Unfortunately, it also does not do well. According to Wikipedia, which is never wrong, $1.6 million is what it grosses. Doesn't place in box office. No movies ahead of us, just Harry Potter. Harry Potter's number one that year. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. It does fare a little bit better. IMDb's a low rating of 6.4. Rotten Tomatoes, the critics meter is 67%, and the audience score is 63%. So it's still fresh. It does win a 2002 Fangoria Chainsaw Award. It's nominated for Best Limited Release or Direct-to-Video Film and Best Actor, Peter Mullan. It does win a Catalonian International Film Festival Award for Best Director of Brad Anderson, and it's nominated for Best Film. It does win a Fright Meter Award, Best Horror Movie. I have never heard of these people. AFI distinctions not available. Right. We will start with Ellis, who this was part of your short list. This was a very short list. It was just, I think it was session 9. We said, say no more. Like, we'll do session 9. So, Ellis, had you seen this movie before, and what was it like coming to it this time around for the show?
I had seen it before. Back when I was in high school, in the golden age of the video rental store, my friends and I had a regular ritual on the weekends of going to the family video or the Blockbuster and picking out, just going off of the cover, a handful of kind of B horror movies. And sometimes we'd give them the MST 3K treatment, but other times we'd actually be engrossed with them. And this was one that, we rented it because it looked interesting and watched it, and I loved it. I thought it was awesome. It's, if I have to compare it to something that's anything close to it, I always compare it to The Shining, because it's the single location, slow burn, ambiguous ending horror movie with a small cast. And I just think it's great. And so I hadn't seen it in a long time. So I went back and rewatched it to prepare for this. And I found it just as compelling as I had the first time I had seen it.
There's a lot of people whose ears just perked up because they heard The Shining and that comparison. It's an accurate one. That's the movie that I'm not a Shining fan at all. I'm hard on that movie, but I do feel like this has a lot of similarities to it. Lizzy, had you seen this movie before?
I had. So my very first memory, Ellis, I don't know if you remember this, but this was during the time, like Ellis said, where it's all about the videotape and the VCR, and our dad's truck had a VCR like TV thing in the back hooked up to it, and we're driving down to our ninny's house. And so as we're in the car, we're driving down watching it, and because it's just one TV, then we're just watching whatever's been chosen. And so I don't know exactly how old I was, but our ninny passed away when I was 15, so it had to have been younger than that. I have to imagine I was probably more like 12 or 13. And this movie horrified me, like nightmares for months. Like I kept hearing the distinct voice that I'm sure we'll discuss later, like consistently in my head for months. And I had to keep convincing oh my gosh, like nightmares after nightmares after nightmares. And I put this movie aside. I think I watched it like one or two more times in college. So revisiting it now, I remembered everything about it, but I have to say as an adult, and specifically as like a God-fearing adult, this really hit in a different way that made me appreciate the horror, but also find it all the scarier. And this movie holds up for me, for sure. It is just as terrifying.
Man, I did not get to this movie that early. It's a huge miss. I just feel like this is a movie I can bring up and people say, what? What movie? What are you talking about? So this is one of those hidden gems like Rec. I push Rec on everyone. We have an episode on it. Go check it out. So I got to this one. I think I do a horror movie challenge every year. And I want to say this was 2020's horror challenge, where I will watch 31 movies within different categories and different trivia from certain directors or whatever. And this was one in 2020 that I got to. And honestly, sometimes that list is a little bit of drudgery. Like sometimes the list is go find the worst B movie from whatever director that you can find. From U-Bowl, go find a U-Bowl terrible movie. This one is one of those movies that makes that list worth it, makes that challenge worth it. So I was blown away. I really, really enjoyed this one. There's a Korean movie called Gunjeom Haunted Asylum, which definitely go see if you enjoy this. And it reminds me a lot of this. It's just it's not a found footage. I really, really like the found footage genre. I feel like this one could go into the found footage. It would be a different version of this movie, but it'd be really interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hope people from our podcast listeners are like, yeah, I'm going to go check out this movie. And before they do, we're going to take an ad break, and Lizzy's going to break down the plot summary from this wild movie. So we'll be right back.
Welcome to the All 80s Movies Podcast.
I'm Bill.
And I'm Jason. And this is the podcast where we talk about the blockbusters, the flops, and everything in between from one of the freshest decades for movies. the 1980s. So whether you're a brain, a jock, a valley girl, or a Jedi, we've got some 80s classics for you.
Do these movies stand the test of time? Are we discovering something new? Is there an 80s movie we're finally watching for the first time?
Join us each week as we dive into the cinematic nostalgia that inspired and influenced a generation. From the hits to the cult classics, we'll discuss our earliest memories, favorite scenes, fun facts, and our not-so-favorite movie moments too.
It's the All 80s Movies Podcast, now available on all major streaming platforms. Please subscribe and happy listening.
And we're back. Last warning before we spoil session 9, and this is one of those movies you really don't want spoiled for you if you haven't seen it. So put us on pause, check it out. Lizzie.
Kirkbride Mental Hospital, once a hospital for the criminally insane, is now being renovated into a town hall. Before they begin, they bring in HEC, an asbestos removal company run by Gordon with his right-hand man, Phil. Gordon needs this job as he is a new father struggling to make ends meet without losing his business. Gordon, once described as a Zen master, always calm, is showing subtle signs of what's bubbling underneath the surface. While touring the facility, Gordon hears a cunning voice say hello, but sees nothing and carries on. The cleaning begins, and an employee finds old tapes of therapy sessions with a girl named Mary who is suffering from dissociative identity disorder. The tapes are played to reveal that Mary has 3 multiple personalities, while we slowly watch Gordon crack from the stress. The last tape and the 9th session reveals that Mary's 3rd personality, Simon, as an all-knowing alter, which reveals to have the same voice as the one who previously greeted Gordon. Gordon comes to and finds that he has brutally murdered his wife, child, and all of his employees before he slips back into a dissociative state within the walls of the asylum.
Oh, very nice.
Very well done.
Simon is a creepy voice. I can't imagine being on the younger side and hearing that.
Oh, yeah.
He's just like, do it, Gordon. It's just like, it's so scary. Oh my gosh, it's so scary.
You know, the actor who does the voice is uncredited. And I think it's an amazing thing that I'm sure we could spend, I think, at least a half hour today discussing just the voice. And I think that's what makes this movie for me so fascinating, is that the ambiguity and the opportunity to theorize and discuss around a character who we never see, who has maybe 10 lines of dialogue and probably spent maybe 30 minutes in a recording studio, I'm guessing, if they wanted to take multiple different takes. And yet, you know, like you said, you know, it's none of the imagery. It's that voice that sticks with you. It's really remarkable.
Yes.
Peter Mullan said he started hearing voices at one point when they were on the roof. He said he heard kind of that call of the void where he was being told in his head, jump off the roof, jump, do it. And he said he had to walk away. So there's a lot of crazy stories that we'll get to.
That's awesome.
Not to make this a truly spooky hour podcast.
Yes.
But although if you do like spooky things, go check out Lizzie's other podcast, Pod You Afraid of the Dark.
Ooh, yes. Shameless plug. We love it.
We're going to shameless plug that. So anyways, we start with Gordon, who, like you said, is this Zen master. He's supposed to be really chill. But we have this introduction to Bill, who's a groundskeeper or something in charge of these renovations for this historical society. And Gordon sells out his crew pretty quickly. Like, it's a 3-week bid, and all of a sudden it's 2 weeks. Phil's clearly not happy about 2 weeks. Then behind Phil's back, Gordon goes, we can do it in 1 week.
Mm-hmm.
So that means they're going to spend a ton of time in this bat-shaped asylum, which what a way of describing this building. I really wish we had Russell here to talk about the architecture of this Danvers asylum. But Gordon's so obviously desperate, and we find out why later. But as our story begins, are you thinking, I don't want to work for this dude, or are you sympathetic to his plight? Because he seems pretty desperate.
I have empathy for him at first because they lay the groundwork. You know, he's in the car with Phil, and they really set this tone that he's just this really exhausted father, because at this point when you're watching it, we know nothing about him. We're only introduced to these little nuggets that they're giving us, which is that his daughter has an ear infection and we're assuming she's probably colicky. And he's like, him and his wife are just absolutely exhausted. And as a parent, I know what that feels like. And I think anyone that is a parent can relate. And most people at least have some kind of 6-degree connection where they can understand. And so I think, and we overhear how this competing company has given a fast and low bid. So you understand the desperation. So I wouldn't love it if I was his employee, but I could absolutely empathize.
Ellis, you want to work for this guy?
Yeah, what I think is so interesting about that is when they first set it up, he's pushing to do the faster bid because he wants to make sure he gets the job. And Phil is clearly the more conservative of the two. And then Phil comes in and bids 2 weeks, which is a bit of a surprise because Phil's earlier said this is a 3-week job, and so, at first, to me, like that's Phil kind of like, throwing a bone to Gordon and really trying to do it. And then to have him come in and but he does negotiate a $10,000 bonus for everybody. And so to me, it's like, if you're willing to work really hard, you got 10 G's at the end, I don't know, I could see it. But I think if you've worked with a guy and you respect him the way that his crew does, I think you trust his judgment and you decide, if he says we can do it in a week and he believes in us, then we can probably get it done.
Yeah, I think it's important. We don't really see any of the crew complain or whine about it too much. There's an eye roll and shock of 1 week, but he just seems sort of like a burnout family man. He's proud to show off pictures of his daughter, met sweeties. He's helping his nephew out, who does not seem capable of pretty much anything, helping the idiot nephew. So that's nice too. And we find out that Gordon had overbid on several others, and he had put out way too high of a price, and so they were down to their last straw. So I do think the desperation to keep them in this setting helps, because we have these conversations all the time, especially for horror movies. Why are you staying there? Why aren't you getting out?
That's right.
And it's nice that we get that up front. And we're introduced to our crew one by one. So we have Phil, he's Gordon's number 2. And you find out he's lost his girlfriend to Hank. And Phil does not want Hank on the job at all, calls him a liability. Gordon's overruling him. And we have Hank himself, who's just Weasley. He's a very spiteful person who just seems to want to take it to Phil. And he's also got this get rich quick. Like everyone buys in to, I guess it's not really a fake story, but it's alternate reality when Phil's telling them, oh yeah, he's going to casino school. I don't think that really happened, right?
Yeah, right. No, I'm pretty sure he made that up.
That's all in Gordon's head. We've got Gordon's nephew who doesn't really know the trade. And then we have Mike. And Mike is this law school dropout who he's incredibly smart, but he drives me insane. Like, I don't know how asbestos crews work, but I didn't really see Mike doing any work.
No. They're always on lunch, or there's one point where Mike's like, oh, I got to go check the breakers. And he doesn't go check the breakers. He goes down and listens to these tapes. And you're just like, you got to get this done in 1 week. Like, what are you doing?
Right.
Get this done.
Because Mike, his dad is an attorney. We've already heard about he's going to go to law school and make his dad proud. Mike doesn't need this job.
That's true.
Mike's screwing off. Mike is sowing his oats and trying to rebel. And eventually, he has his exit plan, which is eventually he'll quit this job, which he doesn't really need. And he'll go to law school. Unless he's murdered, of course. And I think that's kind of he has this sort of superior nonchalance to him throughout the whole movie.
Yes.
The other guys are much more kind of schlubby, like Hank or the nephew, whereas Phil and Gordon are, clear, hardworking blue collar guys, Mike is like a sore thumb. He stands out from the rest, and it's fitting that he's the one who finds the tapes.
That makes sense. That's a good point.
He has that eerie scene with the lobotomy pick.
Yeah.
Well, it's a pencil or something, right? When he's doing it.
Yeah, chopstick. Yeah.
Yeah. Where
Yeah,
he's, I don't know why an attorney knows, I guess he's studying this as well, but he pulls over Jeff and is just showing that pick. And we get the payoff later on of Gordon.
Yeah,
Gordon's watching very intently everything that Mike is saying. And there's
Chekhov's lobotomy.
Yeah, exactly. And there's just this uneasy dynamic amongst the crew members that they all don't really go together. Ellis covered Mike, he really doesn't fit, but Hank hates Phil and Phil hates Hank.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just have this uneasy tension there. Did you guys like the dynamics amongst the crew members, or do you want more of a family type buddy?
Honestly, I don't really. I think I kind of like the tension because it creates a red herring, so to speak. You know, until the very end plot twist is revealed, the tension really yields itself to trying to figure out what's actually going on. I think if they were a real family, then I think it would be much harder to look at Phil, because at one point they really try to make it seem like Phil is behind all of this and Phil's doing this. And even when Phil discovers Hank, he gives this kind of almost like apathetic look towards Hank, which is very odd considering that he's, you know, clearly not well when he sees him. And they really try to set it up to make it seem like Phil is potentially this bad guy. And I think if there wasn't this tension and then eventually leading up to almost kind of backstabbing where Phil and Mike are kind of conspiring behind Gordon's back, that really allows the tension to build so that you really are surprised at the end.
Yeah, he has that line, "What are you going to do, Gordon? Hit me?" And then later on finds out he hit his wife.
Yeah.
Gordon had hit his wife. It's like, oh, okay.
Oh, I think also for me the central theme of the movie is the human inclination to sin, and I think that these characters all have great flaws to one degree or another, and Phil and Hank's are interpersonal. Mike's is whatever kind of weird sort of laziness thing he has going on. Jeff, probably a drug addict. We don't know. Phil may also be, because we see him cutting some kind of deal, which never really explained, with the two like street tough guys. He says that, I told the graffiti artist to not come around here anymore, but I'm not sure that I buy that story. They all have, and then of course Gordon, and each one of them has some kind of flaw, like deep sort of seated flaw, and I think it's a really interesting way to set that up, that if they were a more jovial, happy group, perhaps their downfall would have been more sad, but I think it would have clashed tonally with the movie's overall themes.
That's really interesting. I don't think I've examined their characters from that lens, but yeah, I like that a lot. This entire movie centralizes around the theme of weakness.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Simon says is weakness, but every single one of them has a weakness. Phil has his weakness for Amy. He pines for Amy. Hank, his weakness is money. That's what does him in. Like you talked about with Mike, it's the slothfulness. He's just he's not ambitious. Then Jeff is almost childlike.
Yeah. He
doesn't want to go downstairs because it's in the dark. I'm nyctophobic, which is great. I would say that too, rather than I'm afraid of the dark.
Afraid of the dark.
I get it though. I get it.
I grabbed these Oreos. They're in your car. Is that okay?
He would be the one eating the Oreos too.
Right,
yeah,
right.
He's very childlike.
Yes.
And we get this tour of the facility from Bill in the beginning. We're shown these seclusion rooms that are littered with photos. They're clearly just these unstable mental patterns. They stop making sense. They stop being about family. And it's very unsettling. And then we're shown shots of chairs with straps on them, given this brief tour of this hydrotherapy room where patients are submerged in cold water to chill them out. And then we're told of this cemetery where there are people buried without names. They just have their patient numbers. And so Lizzie's very familiar with this conversation because we have it a lot. But Ellis, this is your turn. I'll start with you. If you're on the receiving end of this tour, like the first 15 minutes of this tour, $10,000 bonus or not, are you staying?
No, absolutely not. No, no way. Well, and first of all, this was shot on location in Danvers, which is a real place, which has since actually been condemned in real life. But like they're in the actual real life hospital building shooting this, and when they're giving the tour of one of the patient's seclusions where they have the art therapy, and they're going through all the pictures, and there's always cutouts and stuff. The camera pans across the wall, and one of the strips of newspaper that's cut out and taped says, "Suddenly, it's going to dawn on you," which to me is this beautiful, eerie foreshadowing of the ending, and seeing the residual kind of echo of human suffering, which that place would have been. Like, I don't necessarily, although I'm a religious person, but I don't know that I believe in like ghosts per se. Like, I don't know that but I certainly don't want to be anywhere near a place where like I wouldn't want to tour a concentration camp, for example. Like, even I don't want to be near sites of suffering like that. They just make me feel extremely uneasy. I don't think that you could pay me enough money to spend any time in a hospital like that. It's the creepiest damn place I've ever seen, and there's a scene, the nyctophobe scene, where they're in the hallway and they have all those like hazmat suits hanging up there.
Yes.
And the movie constantly sets up the various moments where you think they're going to do a trope like a hand's going to come out, and it doesn't happen because the movie's extremely understated and subtle. But like that image of that hallway, like, F that. No way, dude. I'm out of there. No way.
I'm so right there with you. There's nothing that could make me want to do that. There's my girlfriends, and every now and again I'll like flip flop and be like, okay, maybe like I'll go and I'll like say some prayers beforehand, but I don't know. But there's a tuberculosis hospital here in Louisville called Waverly Hills, and it's like a really well-known hospital. But in my mind, I'm just like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go anywhere near it. I don't want the smoke. That's always my response. And Chad knows this about me. So there's just nothing that anyone could do to make me go in there and stay.
I'm unsurprised. I am unsurprised. I'm going. $10,000.
I know. I was going to say, I know you would go.
I'm going.
You're the brave one.
No, I'm the stupid one that dies, like everyone else. I grew up in West Virginia, and we have a incredibly haunted Moundsville State Penitentiary.
Ooh.
Ton of bad things happen there. And unfortunately, if you go on Halloween, don't go on Halloween. They have a bunch of people in like gorilla suits or whatever doing fake out scares out of the cells. It's stupid. Go any other time other than Halloween and experience places like the Sugar Shack, where you'll walk in and the temperature drops 20, 30 degrees.
Ugh.
And it is just...
No, thank you.
I don't want it. And then you bring it home. That's how
the
You
thing.
bring it home with you. You can't just leave it there. It's so scary.
I do like the thought of places having just energy. In this place, real or even movie cinema, this has got a lot of history. So the building, as Ellis pointed out, it's an actual building, or was, and they were only allowed to film in a very small section because most of it was just too much in disrepair. The federal government had abandoned this old mental health facility, and the original plan was to house 500 patients, with potential to house up to 1,500. But by the 1940s, there's 2,300 patients crammed into here. They put them in the basement to hold them. 278 people in a single year died in the hospital's walls. and they're doing shock therapies. I'm going to air quote, pioneered lobotomies, drugs, straitjackets. John Hawthorne, the judge over the Salem witch trials, they built an insane asylum on his land. So the judge that was in charge of the Salem witch trials, like, this is a ton of creepy stuff. David
Yeah.
Caruso said there was a bunch of unexplained things happening. During the 1980s, 115 teenage patients just went missing. They just went missing, and the staff refused to provide an answer. They just would say they've been assigned to a new doctor. They were never found. And most of the props we see, they're not studio props. They found this stuff inside of the building and they just rearranged it. They only did 3 things. So the kitchen, they added meat hooks. The tunnel that Ellis was talking about, they added surgical gloves that they hung up. And the hydrotherapy room, they had a metal tub added. That's it. Everything else was on site.
A creepy swan that was there.
Yes,
Oh
the
my
creepy
gosh.
swan painting. Yeah, they actually found patient tissue and blood samples, but they didn't film any of that because the film crew just said, no, this is too far. We don't want to do it out of fear. So the grounds themselves are actually considered haunted. Visitors report screaming, banging, crying. That cemetery thing is real. There are actual patient numbers instead of names. So they see deep black shadows flitting about the property, and disembodied voices are heard from the cemetery. So it's a good time. I bet as an actor getting paid nothing for this film. Are you guys even taking this acting job knowing that history?
Yeah, no.
You-
Probably not. I'm too squeamish.
Yeah, our parents raised us right. We're not. We know.
No,
We're not going.
I do love horror movies because I'm fascinated by movies like this and The Shining that have a kind of psychological component to them, or movies like the Exorcist that kind of examine the nature of evil. I find that deeply interesting. But I don't want to be that close to it in real life. And so I think that I would, you wouldn't get me to Waverly Hills, and you certainly wouldn't get me into the disembodied voice graveyard in the back of the old insane asylum. That's not going to happen.
Same.
They're wise siblings, and
Yeah.
I'm staying the night because the hotel's expensive.
You
And,
would. You're the one that's babysitting
Awesome.
in the house of the devil. You're like, sure, I'll take that.
I mean, yeah.
A gig's a gig, right?
Someone's got to do it.
She's old. How bad could this be? Like,
That's right.
$2,000 is super sketchy, but maybe he's just desperate.
Yeah.
It's fine. Yep. Yeah, I'm getting murdered. So as we go through this asylum, we learn about this individual, Mary Hobbs, and Lizzy brought it up. She has dissociative identity disorder, multiple personalities disorder, and she has these personalities. Princess, who's got a little bit of like a southern accent. There's Mary herself. There's Billy, who seems to be a sibling, and then there's Simon. In most of the movie, we try and get these personalities to talk about Simon, and Billy is the only one that knows about Simon. Everybody else is very, very Mary says she doesn't know him at all. Princess says you have to talk to Billy. So those are our tapes. We learn these all through Mike's tape replays, and eventually we find out that she killed her entire family and that Simon caused her to do it. So this is our parallel. This is our parallel to Gordon. Do you like kind of this side story of Mary Hobbs and this mystery of patient 444?
Yes, I love it. I think it's amazing because I think what having both stories do with it really examines this idea of like, so with Mary, she loves her brother Peter. They are like super tight brother and sister. They're playing hide and seek. Peter scares her and she ends up falling and cutting, or her China doll breaks like on her chest, I think is how they describe it, and cuts her. And so assuming she's upset and hurt and in pain, it kind of releases this almost like reptilian instinct. And that's where Simon emerges. And so we see that in Mary, and then to be able to turn around and see that in Gordon, I think the ultimate lesson is talking about who Simon is. And I think if it was only happening to Gordon, I don't think we'd fully appreciate how dangerous Simon actually is.
100%. It's what makes the movie, because we've been hearing this voice, hello, Gordon, you know who I am. Do it, Gordon. And then at the end, when the session 9 tape plays, and you hear that voice, which, first of all, that voice is coming out of a woman, Mary Hobbs,
Yeah.
who's been princess this whole time, who's been like, oh, he says I'm pretty, and then he's like, and Billy's like, oh well, sir, I'm just a schoolboy from the 50s,
Like
sir.
transatlantic.
And then Simon's like, hello, doc. It's just like, what in the hell? Imagine being the doctor in that room, like, whoa.
Right? I mean, I'd be like, I think someone else is going to take her case.
But that moment where you realize that the voice Gordon has been hearing is the alter of Mary Hobbs. Like that for me is the point where that's what takes this movie from what would have otherwise been a kind of interesting character study of a man, like a violent version of Death of a Salesman, where he's just stressed out and he's at the end of his rope and he kind of loses it, to now this, what is Simon? And to me, that's what makes the movie so interesting. And I have to go back again to The Shining, because if you watch Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, I'm not talking about Stephen King's novel, but the movie The Shining, you could, for a moment, if you're not careful, you could maintain the theory that they're all just having an episode of some kind of shared psychosis due to the isolation and everything, and that they're all hallucinating and they're all kind of losing it. Yes, Danny might be psychic, but there's no real like evil presence or ghosts, and that's all just their collective insanity, except that something opens the door to the pantry to let Jack Torrance out of the pantry. And so because that happens, the data of the movie tells us the ghosts are real, right? And it's like the movie, once that happens, it's like, okay, Simon is something. It's not like Gordon is, this is his inner thoughts or inner monologue, or this director also did The Machinist. It's not this is the separate identity that I'm projecting, as another person in space, but it's all in my head. Like Simon is something. And to me, that's what makes this movie so interesting, is what is Simon? And I think that's what you're left puzzling when it's all over. I
think as a kid, what made this movie so scary to me as a kid, which still is scary to me now, is this idea that this was the movie that kind of taught me that given the right set of circumstances, anyone is capable of snapping. Like, we all have that capability inside of us if we are given like the perfect storm. But I think as an adult, and as I mentioned earlier, as like a God-fearing adult, to me, I texted Ellis this earlier, I feel like this whole movie is kind of Cain and Abel fan fiction a little bit, in the sense of like when God is talking to Cain, he's hot with anger because God didn't accept his offering and accepted Abel's. And he warns him. He's like, be careful. Sin is crouching at your door and it desires to have you. And to me, that is Simon. It's like this energy of the enemy that's like, I know your deepest desires of exacting revenge, or I know the ugliness that could be there. And if you don't know, I'm going to convince you that it's there, and I'm going to push you and I'm going to push you. And every single time that you get stressed out, I'm going to take that and I'm going to pull it until I force you to do what you want, so that you are no longer an autonomous human being. You are completely my play thing. And that is what is so scary about Simon.
I'm going to push back on one thing, though, because what Simon says, coming through the voice of Mary Hobbs, which, by the way, I think that's why his name is Simon, because Simon says, is
that's true.
That he says, well, she let me do it, Doc. Yeah. They always do. That Simon is not an entity that takes possession of them like Pazuzu takes possession of Reagan in The Exorcist. or the way the Overlook takes possession of Jack Torrance. Simon is the tempting voice, but the people make the decision to do it. That's at least the implication that the movie gives.
Of course.
And
But
I think that's what makes it so creepy.
well, I agree, but that's kind of my point. Like, Cain wasn't possessed when he murdered his brother.
Sure. Okay, yeah.
But it's that idea of, I know you so well, and I'm gonna
Manipulate
expand
you, yeah.
on that till that at this point, like, you're so like hot with rage that there's nothing that you can do about it. So I appreciate what you were trying to say, but I think you and I are on the same page, that it's like the people actually want it.
Yeah.
It is interesting that how minor of instances that really pushes him, like the final straw. Because, getting boiling water on your leg does not feel great, but he's going in to his wife with flowers.
Yeah.
He's celebrating. And just one minor incident and accident, and he murders his wife and child. Look, you brought up Mary. Mary is pushed and falls on a porcelain doll, and it cuts her. And she murders her entire family.
Right.
And so I think what terrifies me with Simon, and Pazuzu came to mind as well, is he's looking for this weakness. He's looking for that doorway. And even in just that brief moment of rage, that's when he's striking. Because a normal reaction to your spouse pouring boiling water on your leg by accident, there's probably some words, but there's certainly not domestic violence. There's certainly not murder. And same with a child. If a child gets hurt, they may get up and slap their brother because they hurt them. But past that, to murder their entire family it's terrifying that Simon is able to enter at that point and say, do it. Do it.
Yeah. Oh, so scary. It really scares me. It made me, when I watched this movie as a kid, it made me afraid of myself, honestly. Like, I don't know if anybody else felt that or not, if I'm just the crazy one, but I just remember this idea of like having so many nightmares of hearing that voice that then I got so nervous that like somehow Simon was like entering into my mind. It was something that I had the worst nightmares about. And Ellis will tell you, I think actually you were in college at this point, but like I'm so much like Ellis in the fact that like any kind of suffering of any kind just like makes me cry. I like ran over a bunny in high school and like ran inside and like woke my mom up and hysterically cried. I think you were in college when this happened. So I mean, like in my mind, it's like I would never want to do that, but you have to ask yourself, like, are we capable of snapping? And that as a kid, that was the scariest part for me. Now that I'm an adult, I have my feet firmly planted. I was like, I built my foundation on the rock. So like, I don't feel that way anymore. But like as a child absorbing that was what was so scary about it to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's a weakness for anyone. Everyone's going to have their own different weak point. And what's interesting about this movie, for me, it's Phil. When Phil just starts acting like a huge jerk. He'd been prickly before, but he just starts being unreasonable. And there's reason for it. We find out that Gordon becomes this unreliable narrator. And from the point, really, I think when Phil is becoming aggressive, we have to start wondering and backtracking, what actually happened? What was said? Did any of this really happen? Because we keep hearing their, what's their phrase when they're on the walkie-talkies that they say over and over?
So like right at the very end, like when their conversation's like so-and-so out.
They say, come back.
Come back.
Come back. That's what, come back.
Come back.
So,
I need you to come back. Yeah.
Yeah. So that becomes really relevant. They're trying to get Gordon to come back from this psychosis. But for you guys, was there an earlier point or maybe a later point where you think, okay, now that I've seen this, I don't think this happened, or I don't think this went down? Is an earlier point? For me, I think it's the Phil Amy phone call.
Oh, see, that's interesting because I assumed that call definitely happened, but Phil like got the phone and fake dialed a number and then pretended to have a conversation in order to sell out Hank, and which Gordon then calls him out and says, we saw you. We saw you on the phone. We heard your voice, but we didn't hear Amy. And so my assumption was that all that happened, but that Gordon is correctly kind of seeing that Phil didn't really call Amy. Phil seizing the opportunity to cut Hank loose and get back at Hank, which creates that red herring of maybe Phil is the one who killed Hank or hurt Hank or did something to him.
I don't necessarily know how I feel about the phone call, but I do think that the argument about it did not actually happen. You see like this heated moment between Phil and Gordon where they're fighting over it. He's like, give me the phone. I want to see it. And they keep arguing back and forth. And at the end, finally Phil curses Gordon out. And I think that I do not think that actually happened. I think in my mind that Gordon is having this idea. He's like unfolding this narrative in his own mind because he has two different versions. Like he has what's actually happening in real time, and then he has whatever narrative is forcing him to think that he needs to be like all these people are out to get him. He needs to take them out, and we don't actually ever really find out why he feels the need to involve his employees with his kind of spree that he's going on, but we just assume it's because he's just a madman. There is no, it's like Michael Myers at this point. There is like no motive. He's just completely crazy. But I don't think that happened. But I think I never really thought about the phone call, to be honest. I think that that's interesting.
We do see that softer side of Phil, like a restored version of him right as Gordon's killing him in the seclusion room. So,
oh, yeah.
We do get that break of, okay, that's not actually what he said, and his tone changes. David Caruso is so great in this. I wish he got more Hollywood movies. Like, I don't know why. CSI Miami is what he gets. And
that's right.
And that's about it. He gets to make murder puns, which he didn't get to do here. Didn't get to say anything about Hank.
Oh, man. The music is very CSI-y, though. Maybe they're same.
Yeah. The same
bong, twing.
Yeah. There's no The Who in this movie, though.
No, there's not.
As soon as they find Hank, there's no yeah.
You just mentioned something, Lizzy, that never really occurred to me until just now. That there's a motive, however flimsy and insane there may be, for killing his wife and evidently his dog and his daughter.
I forgot about the dog.
In a fit of homicidal psychosis. But why does he? What would drive him to murder his crew? That doesn't really get explored, and to me, I guess that's a testament to how, by the end of the movie, at least every time I've seen this 3 or 4 times, I'm so enchanted and enthralled with this question of what Simon is by the end of the movie. I'm so preoccupied with that I don't even really bother to notice until you just mentioned it. Though, like, it's unclear to me why he killed everybody. I just want to accept it as like a given fact, because to me that's actually the least interesting part of the movie. Like, I'm just like, whatever, that happened, but like that's just, again, for me, it becomes the Simon movie, and from as soon as that voice comes out of that tape recorder, everything else to me is just scenery, and Simon is the lead of the movie.
The only explanation that I can think of is that, Simon is explaining to the doctor when he is speaking as an altar for Mary. He's saying, he killed Peter. And then the only reason why he killed Mary's parents was so that Mary's parents wouldn't find out and then get her into trouble. And so that's my only reason why I can deduce why he would do something like that. I have to imagine it was just like they're in his orbit right now, like as it had happened. I think, because he's going to this place every single day, and we don't know if he's actually going to a motel or if he's going home to
he's sleeping in his truck in the parking lot.
Yeah, sleeping in his truck, walking. That's true, because he does run into Hank at the. I don't think he expected to see Hank there. So but I think just because like this place and these people are in his orbit as he commits this crime and kind of finally disassociates, I think that they're just truly wrong place, wrong time, especially that guy who comes at the end. I mean, that poor guy, like,
Oh,
Oh,
dude.
Craig.
yeah, I mean,
Right.
that's a rough scene to watch.
Yeah.
There is a cursed coin, though. Everyone that touches the coin, it's the order of their death. So
Oh,
I never thought
fascinating.
about that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I'll have to rewatch with that in mind.
Yeah, there are a lot of weird little clues because in the beginning we see Hank or Gordon's bag, and he's got the jar of Jif that winds up right
That's
before
cool.
Hank is killed, and he's got the Oreos in the bag that we see are in the truck, and then Mike finds those roses covered in it's the red asbestos treatment,
Yeah.
but we see roses in the back of Gordon's van. So we've got all those clues to kind of lead us into okay, this guy these are important. You see the Jif peanut butter. Okay, he's the killer. I did
Yeah.
not catch that anytime when I went through, but as you go back and watch it,
It's true.
this is Brad Anderson's first horror movie, so he does a fantastic job. He's coming off of 2 romantic comedies, Next Stop Wonderland and Happy Accidents. He does go on to do The Machinist. The Call is another standout. And he's got a couple in post-production or filming right now with The Silent Hour and World Breaker. Honestly, I'm unfamiliar with pretty much any of his filmography other than Machinist, but he does get a foray into kind of thrillers, horror thriller type with I think the Call, Vanishing on 7th Street. So he kind of finds a niche off of this romantic comedy stint and straight into horror. I think he does a great job here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I said,
Yeah, he does.
the movie's so understated.
Yes.
There's no jump scares. There is violence, but it's not gory. Like you said, Liz, the most violent scene is reserved for the very end. It's the one on-screen death that we actually see.
Yeah, Craig.
And it's not even that graphic, but it's still very with the way the music trills while his leg is twitching. Like it's just such a visceral moment.
The hand on the face.
They do so much. Well, he does so much with so little. And I think he got a lot out of his actors. I think that the guy that played Gordon, I don't have his name in front of me.
Peter Mullan.
Yeah, Peter Mullan, who I only know from Trainspotting. I'm sure he's done other things, but he's Mother Superior in Trainspotting. He's incredible in this. So I'm sure we'll talk about performances later, but I just think that he got a lot out of his actors.
He's magnificent. That scene in particular, the one that you're talking about with the lobotomy scene, the thing that scares me more than anything in that they really do a close up on his face, on Gordon's face as he's doing it, and you can just see he is so dead behind the eyes as he's doing it. I mean, it is really frightening to watch. Like he just has this very like a stare that would almost be like a nothing burger kind of stare of like, I'm just waiting for the bus and just kind of sitting, staring into nothingness. Like as he's literally taking someone, like it is just, it's so, so scary. And then to me, the very last scene with him where he's on a broken cell phone, where it's like, that tells you like he has just completely slipped into absolute madness. Like there's no going back for him at this point. He's never coming to. I just think he did such a beautiful, understated job.
Calling his wife and asking for forgiveness. That's awful.
It was chilling. It was like the little pictures of the sweet little baby. Oh my gosh, it's so hard. I have to plug my ears when they show the actuality of that scene because I just can't listen. I mean, even
which again they don't show. You just hear it. The movie does so much with audio. The one thing I gotta get in real quick, just because we're talking about Peter Mullan, the scene that he has with Jeff, his nephew, in the graveyard. We're talking about the numbered headstones, and they're sitting there on like a log, I think, and they're having a conversation, and Jeff's like, "Hey, I'm gonna work really hard for you. I'm gonna," and you can see visibly that Peter Mullan's character, Gordon, is a man desperately trying to hold it together. He sells that performance so much. He's trying to be strong, but he is on the verge of having a complete emotional breakdown, and not like I'm going to go crazy breakdown, but like he's going to collapse into like a puddle or something, and he's just desperately trying to hold it together. He's trying not to cry. He just really sells that moment that like he is so tired and so broken and so sad, but he can't stop because he has to finish this gig or he loses his company. And how's he gonna make things right with his wife, who I guess he still believes is alive at this point? If he folds his company and like all the pressure is on him, and I really feel for him in that moment. I empathize with him so much as the weight of the world is on him in this graveyard. It's just a beautiful
Right.
scene.
Yeah. And you mentioned the gruesome death. That is our only instance of CGI. And this movie, for direct-to-video, it actually is a trendsetter. It's one of the first films that's shot at 24p HD. It's 24 frames per second. And to people watching that for the first time, you're going to notice something slightly off. It's not going to feel natural because most movies at the time were shot at 30 frames a second. So there's just a slight unsettling cadence to the movie, and it's just not going to feel natural to you. And they do other things in the background. Very, very understated movie, like we've talked about, but they're putting animal and mechanical noises in the background, and you may not really pick up on them, but you're not going to feel happy watching this movie. You're not going to feel, there's no sorrowful cello or anything in the background telling you how to feel. It's just unsettling the entire time.
Absolutely. Every time Simon makes contact with Gordon or Gordon hears Simon's voice, there's static.
Yeah.
As though it's it's like a radio transmission. He's receiving something every time that happens. It's very subtle, but it's consistent throughout.
Now, what do you think, Ellis? What do you think that Simon is? Do you think that it's a paranormal thing, or do you think that it is truly like this dark passenger, to take a quote from from Dexter?
I think the movie, the data of the movie, I think if you just confine yourself to the mise en scène, as it were, then I think we have two possible conclusions here. On the one hand, the movie does try to kind of sell a certain supernatural attitude. When Mike uses his box cutter to open the box, we hear the China doll breaking, we hear screaming. They make a big point of the fact that conversation we were just discussing a moment ago between Jeff and Gordon in the graveyard is that they're sitting on a log that's above Mary's tombstone. They make a point of showing her number 444. So I think that you could say, on the one hand, that Simon is an entity, and he says at the end of the movie, Princess lives in the tongue because she's always talking, right? And Billy lives in the eyes because he sees everything, right? And these are Mary's altars that are clearly her altars, and then Simon lives in the weak and the wounded. Okay, and so Simon is either, I think a demon or something that makes contact with people who are weak and wounded, and like you were saying, Lizzy, manipulates them or tempts them or into committing atrocities. Or Simon is like the shadow from Jungian psychology. It's like every person in their collective, as part of the collective human unconscious, every person has a shadow self, if you will. So everyone has a Simon. In that sense, their Simon is unique to them, yet Simon is also universal in the sense that it's the universal human inclination towards evil, what the church calls concupiscence, that we all have this capacity to do evil in us. I think the movie wants you to see Simon as something supernatural just because of all the other the other weirdness surrounding it, the noise from the box and the gravestone and that kind of stuff. But I think the more interesting, personally, interpretation is the idea that Simon is a universal feature of the human psyche that happens to be expressing itself through Mary and Gordon, but that everybody has a Simon, as it were. I think that's my take.
Well said.
I kind of like the thought of Mary bringing it into this asylum. She brought this entity. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a lot of Simons out there, but this specific entity that winds up latching on to Gordon was brought in by Mary, and wherever she acquired it, whatever psychosis allowed it to enter, that it's just allowed to thrive in a place like Danvers. Yeah. That is just, there was so much evil that went on there in the movie universe and in our own reality that this evil presence could just thrive.
And I think that's probably the take that the filmmakers are going for. And that, Simon is kind of a genius loci, like the spirit of a place. You mentioned earlier, like places have an energy, right? It's like he's become the energy of this place. Gordon, we learn that in the timeline of the movie, Gordon kills his wife and family after securing the bid. So he's gone to the hospital. He's been there at the hospital. And perhaps that's when the entity, if that's what it is, has latched onto him now. It's noticed that he has weakness and it can exploit that weakness. And he brings that home with him. And then the rest unfolds.
Yeah.
Which is why you shouldn't go to Waverly.
That's right. That's right. No, I'm not. You can, there's no amount of cash. I can't. I don't. I'm kind of with you, Ellis, where I don't know exactly where I stand when it comes to ghosts. I'm certainly a religious person, but I don't know when it comes to spirits. But because I don't know, I am not on a mission to find out. I don't care to ever put myself in a position to have to figure that out.
Yeah. Nope.
Perfectly happy being ignorant.
Yeah.
No Ouija board to this.
No.
Well, because I'll be very clear. I definitely believe in demons. I'm just not sure that I believe in ghosts. So, right. I've had this sort of half trolling my I didn't really even mean to do it, but I was trying. My 7-year-old was clearly not really scared, but kind of pretending to be scared in order to drag out bedtime one night. And she was, Dad, but I don't want to, there's a ghost in my room, Dad. I don't want to go to sleep. Dad, I'm scared there's a ghost in my room. I'm like, honey, ghosts aren't real. Demons are real. but ghosts aren't real, honey. You don't have to worry.
You should be much more. Yeah. There's something that you should really be afraid of. I'm on your end of the spectrum. I will put it as like a 1% chance that they exist. But I will tell you that 1% is firmly, and Lizzie's heard this story, I've gotten it from my daughter, where we bought a new house and the previous owner died in this house. And my daughter told me that a man was coming into her room every night. And her room is on the opposite side of the house from us. And so just to play it out, I was like, okay, old or young? She was old. So did he have a name? And she said it started with a C. The dude that died in our house, his name was Carlo with a C. And I'm like, say no more. You just, but she would tell me every night this ghost would come from my wife's office into her room and he would stand there and then he would leave. And I'm just like, well, sucks to be you in your haunted room. So, he does not bother us. But when we bought this house, there were oil crosses on every doorway. The people had put oil crosses. And we're not Catholic. So I don't know if that's part of the Catholic rite of just cleansing the house or whatever. But they did not. There was not a cross above my daughter's room. It was all over the downstairs. And we didn't bother asking, like, hey, what was that about? Now I know. We weren't told that he died in the house. We were told much later.
I'm pretty sure they have to disclose that. Isn't that a rule?
What are you gonna do?
What are you
Right.
gonna do?
Yeah,
What are you
my
gonna-
daughter's room's haunted. Ours isn't, so she'll grow up tough.
That's right. Yeah, sucks to be you in your haunted room. She'll grow up
Yeah.
tough.
That's really funny.
All right, let's hand out some awards for this great movie.
Yes.
MVP. Ellis can be director, actor, supporting actor. Who's your MVP for session 9?
I think my if it has to be a person, then I think my MVP is going to be Peter Mullan. I think he carries the film again. I think that he just conveys the heartache of a probably a very decent man who is has allowed himself to be broken through a series of things that we don't really fully understand, but are probably very normal, banal things that just kind of worn him down. And now he's in this incredible situation. I think his performance is just outstanding. So I would say he's probably the MVP.
He's fantastic. It doesn't have to be a human being, though. If you've got another choice,
I was just going to say the setting itself is so being in the Danvers hospital. I'm sure some of it was on a soundstage too, but just like the overall the set dressing of the film is so it's so creepy and unsettling, and every room is a little bit different, and the way they just again take you on the tour in the beginning to establish the layout of everything, and the whole thing is confined to this one location. To me, it is it ties the whole movie together. It is the setting, and it's just brilliant.
Lizzy, who's your MVP?
I went with Peter Mullan as well. I just think he's spectacular. It's so subtle. And Ellis, honestly, that scene that you discussed with early on the log, that's really all there is to say. Because I mean, he truly, when we all know what it feels like to be hanging on by a thread and just try to hold it together. And you really do, like you try. So he perfectly emulates what that looks like, where it's like at any moment, if somebody even dares asks if he's okay, he will just fall apart. He's just trying so hard to keep his poker face up. And that's really hard to act, I imagine. It's just this, I think it would be really, really easy to overact.
Oh yeah.
But he does it so well, where you can connect, so just feel so awful for him. But it's also subtle enough that you really do buy that he's like this great guy, and that possibly Phil is behind it. You know, you really don't know until the end, until you know. So it's just he's spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
He is fantastic, but I went with Phil. I think it's because I have so much CSI Miami exposure, and I did get to this late. I think David Caruso just should be more in movies. I cannot believe that he didn't get more gigs. Phil's just, he's the right kind of jerk in this movie. Mm-hmm. Like, he's willing to put Gordon in his place and tell him he's losing it. He's right. He's right about Hank. Hank is a liability. So I wish they'd lose. But he's not a great guy when it comes to Amy. So
no.
Yeah. They all have such interesting flaws, and David Caruso plays an interesting character here. Best supporting actor, Ellis.
The uncredited voice actor who did the voice of Simon.
Oh, nice. I didn't even think about that. That's such a good one.
I don't know who that person is, but to me, I can't remember her name. It's Mercedes something or other, but the voice actress who did the voice of Pazuzu in the original Exorcist.
Oh, yeah.
That's a movie where the visual effects in The Exorcist are terrific, but that's a movie whose sound design is it's actually what makes the movie. Is to me, when Father Karras plays that tape, and it's the backwards English, and that's horrifying enough, and then they play it in reverse, and now you hear it as English, and it's even creepier somehow when you actually hear it. And I get the same vibe from all of the sessions, and I get the impression that Mary did the Billy and and the princess voices herself, that actress. I don't get the impression that she is doing Simon. I have no idea who's doing Simon. I've tried to Google it. I can't find it anywhere. But that whoever that guy is did a great job.
Agreed. I mean, it was enough to haunt Lizzy for months. So. Lizzy, who's your best supporting?
I went with Brad Anderson, the director. I think he did a really good job. For me, the movie just works really, really well. And this is one of those movies where I think more people should really know about it. It's your big horror fans typically tend to know about it, but aside from that, it's just not something that lives in pulp culture. But it is a really, really well done film. And honestly, even though the story can feel slow, it's so short that it somehow feels like it's moving quickly. And I think it's a great movie.
It's definitely a slow burn. It's something that largely nothing happens until the last 20 minutes.
Yep.
So if you can hang on to there's some interesting dynamics. I really do. I've seen the complaints on the internet. It's just dudes talking for an hour and 10 minutes. Like, you're not wrong, but please pay more attention.
Yeah, that's right.
I went with Brendan Sexton III as Jeff. I feel like he's our stand-in. Yeah, he's a little bit of an idiot, but he's actually the only one that has the common sense enough to be afraid.
Yeah.
And he's the only one that's consistently afraid, and he shows panic at one point. That scene of him running out of the asylum, tearing off his hazmat suit, and then just going to a van and eating Oreos like a child.
Right.
Like he just does a fantastic job of being then that stand-in for fear.
Yeah.
Hidden gem, Ellis.
Hidden gem, underappreciated minor cast or element. I gotta think about it. The cast is so small in this.
It is.
For me, not the. I kind of have sort of two, and it's the security guard who we meet at the very beginning. And I've seen that actor. He's a kind of a character actor. I think I've seen him in some other things. His voice is really familiar. And then the guy that gives them the tour.
Yeah.
But both of those guys are on the screen together. Well, then, not together on the screen, but each of them has maybe 5 minutes of screen time. But they both just sell their job perfectly, and they set up very convincingly without harping on it. Sometimes the loonies come back into the loony bin. Okay, so is the movie? Are they going to uncover weird people in the hospital? Is that going to be who the bad guy is? When the guys explain the Batwing, okay, the most psychotic, crazy patients are at the end of the Batwings. Okay, is that what it's going to be? Is it going to be some crazy psycho killer has come back to the hospital and drug kids come in and they shoot guns and hopefully at each other, but who knows what they're doing? It's a very convincing moment with these guys. And they plant like a half dozen seeds in your mind very quickly about what the threat might be. And all of them are red herrings, but it's enough to draw you in to okay, something is obviously this is a horror movie. I'm watching a genre film, and then here's all these threats that have been identified for me. So now I'm a little bit more on edge as we go into the hospital.
Bill is so nonchalant about all of that.
Yeah.
In the hydrotherapy room.
Right.
It's like,
yeah,
they dunked the crazies. And
it's just, whatever, yeah. Well, they got a gray cemetery back here. You want to see it's all numbers. It's just numbers. Just like he's like insane. It just the way that he comes across is just. My wife's the town historian. I'm up on all this stuff, and I love them. I love them.
Yeah. Here's the seclusion rooms with completely normal artwork and pictures, and it's fine. Moving on.
That's right.
Lizzy, who's your hidden gem?
I went with Josh Lucas because I have not seen a lot of his body of work, but I do know that he's in one of my favorite rom-coms, Sweet Home Alabama, with Reese Witherspoon.
Oh, no.
And I saw that first. I will not make you watch that. I will not put that up as a short list. But
I've already seen it.
You don't like that movie? I think that movie is so cute. But I loved him in that movie. But then also another random thing is that he, for I don't know how many years, maybe like 10 at least, he's the narrator for all of the Home Depot commercials. And every single time I hear him and hear that voice, I'm just like, that's the guy from Session 9.
I did not know that. So Hank from
he's
Session
got a
9
good gig. You know that he's getting some residuals for all those commercials. So he's, posted up somewhere. Who knows where.
All right. I learned something new. Okay. I'm going to go with a minor element, and I think it's just the sheer job of asbestos cleaning. I think that's so intriguing. It's such a unique twist from this is a haunted house movie. At its core, it's a haunted house movie. And I think the hazmat suit kind of enhances the dark, threatening atmosphere. It's otherworldly, it's unsettling, and it gives them a reason to be there other than stupid family that won't, the second something like blood drips from your walls, grab your suitcase and go.
Right.
They've got a job to do. These are tough guys that don't necessarily get along. So their profession is my hidden gem.
I love it. That's good.
I like that.
Recast. Who are you recasting in this very small, tight-knit group of guys, Ellis?
I gotta say, I gotta punt on this one. I cannot really think of anybody that I would change because they have really good chemistry with one another, and that's what you need in a movie like this, where the whole is again this tight single location haunted house movie. I buy all of their relationships. I believe they've all worked with one another a lot. I fully believe that Hank has stolen Phil's girlfriend and probably did it just to spite Phil. He probably doesn't even really like Amy that much.
That's such an awful line. He's like, I'm going to continue. I'm going to say screwing her.
Yeah.
That's not what he says, just to mess with Phil.
He
doesn't care about her at all.
I don't think I would change any of them because anybody... Part of what serves this movie so well is the fact that, with the exception of David Caruso, none of these are really known actors. And I think that helps you really get into the idea that these really are just a group of blue-collar guys in this real-life hospital. That's a real building until it was, it's been torn down. But at the time, it was a real building. It helps the reality of it. If one of those guys is Matthew McConaughey, then or a famous face, it would immediately break the immersion, I think. And so I think it's important that they be relatively unknown actors, that you can connect with their characters without the celebrity of the actor getting in the way.
I like it.
I like that.
Lizzy, who are you recasting?
So I'm so sorry, Chad, but I'm recasting David Caruso, but it's not because I don't like him. I actually really do like him in this role because I agree with everything Ellis just said, but I just, for the sake of playing, I chose. So I like David Caruso's voice. To me, I'm such a sound and tone person that I get very attracted to listening to all different people's voices. I love the different cadence.
The girls.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Are you going to believe it or not? I picked Tony Goldwyn of all the people. So there's, of course I did. I was like, so I'm going to pick someone else who I also like their voice that maybe would do a good job. That's really funny that you picked Against the Girls. But yeah, I thought that he would have, I think he would do that. And I also really think Tony has good horror chops. I liked him in Last House on the Left. I think he did a good job. I know not everybody loved that movie because it was kind of a rogue of the original, but I think he did a good job in that one. And I think he could do a good job of like a friend turned foe kind of guy.
You and these velvety voices.
I love a velvety voice. I can't help myself. I just love them.
Well, I am going for the opposite of velvety voice. I am recasting Hank with David Arquette.
Oh my gosh, that's a really good one.
Wow, that's actually pretty good. Yeah, David Arquette could do it.
He would do so well.
I just feel like Hank is the dude you want to punch, and I want to punch David Arquette in just about everything he does. So that's
hilarious.
Best shot, Ellis.
There's an establishing shot at the very beginning of the movie where it is it's a wheelchair with straps that I believe probably may have even been used for lobotomy purposes, and we begin upside down, and gradually the camera rotates 180 degrees so that the chair is upright, and multiple times during the movie Gordon stands down and looks down a long hallway at that chair. And to me, the chair is a symbol of madness. It's clearly designed to restrain insane patients. It's sitting here in the middle of this insane asylum. It's beckoning to Gordon throughout the entire movie. It's the first thing we see. And again, it's upside down. And so to me, it's just like the perfect image of the complete consuming topsy-turvy madness that Gordon is going to be sucked into over the course of the movie.
That is a great pick, and also my pick, because that hallway is just a very claustrophobic hallway. It's very dark, and then you just have this bright light shining on this chair. I wish the chair had played a little bit more part, like he'd seen a vision or something, because they kept going back to it. They kept going back to that chair, but maybe it's best left as a symbol of madness than me doing anything otherworldly with it. But I like that too. Lizzy, what's your best shot?
My best shot is when Jeff is in that very narrow hallway. Ellis, you brought it up a little bit earlier, where there's all of the different suits with the rubber gloves. That's such a creepy scene. But to me, the shot of Jeff running hysterically while you have all of these suits. And to Ellis's point, at this point, we don't completely know what's going on. So someone at any point could reach out. So you're just the hairs on the back of your neck. But as you're watching this darkness just begin to swallow him is horrifying. And I will admit, I am not too prideful to admit, as somebody that is afraid of complete and total darkness, I can handle dark, but like that real dark where I just cannot see anything around me, it really does. It creates that claustrophobia where it is very frightening. And I have such secondhand fear watching that scene, but just watching that darkness come upon him and it being such a slow burn, it is a fantastic scene.
Well, they know, like, these guys are working in and around Massachusetts. They know the history of this building. So even though I'm staying on this job, I'm with you. When those lights are just boom, boom, going out and he's being chased and swallowed by the darkness, I am losing my mind right there with Jeff. As soon as you're plunged into darkness, they know the history.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm like, I would be running out and being just like, I quit. I'm never going back in there. Absolutely not. Like, I don't care if I lose 10 grand. I don't care what the circumstances are. I'm getting an Uber and I'm changing my phone number. You're never going to see me again. Like that. I would be so horrified.
Right. We'll go with best scene. A lot of good scenes too.
Yeah. A lot of good scenes. You know, it's tempting to take the easy way out and go back to that graveyard conversation scene just because I think the acting is so good, but we've kind of talked that one to death. And so I think I want to pick something else. Now, probably, if we're going to leave that one aside, I think the ending when Phil Gordon at this point is sort of hallucinating Phil, who's telling him, I need you to wake up. I was watching it with my wife, and to me, again, this just illustrates the way this movie subverts expectations. She's like, oh, is Phil like his imaginary alter ego, Tyler Durden kind of self, which is what The Machinist does, right? Which is the next movie that this director does. And that was a real big thing during this time. Johnny Depp had a similar movie come out around 2001 or so, where he's the writer in like the woods and he's being harassed by a guy that's actually his split personality. Do you remember that movie I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, you stole my story.
My story. Yes. Yeah. That's exactly right. I've seen that. Yeah. That's now my brain's come to a screeching halt because you did that.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
But you're kind of ready for like, oh, okay, Phil isn't real. He's been hallucinating Phil. Phil is his old, and that doesn't happen at all. And instead, you sort of have this moment where Gordon, it's not that he even really accepts what he's done or even confronts what he's done. He just immediately he says I am awake. He uses an expletive, and suddenly at that moment he sort of embraces, I guess, his madness, because the guy walks in at that moment, and then you have the one on-screen episode of violence happens right there in that moment, and it just, to me, it just subverts all expectations we would expect to see happen there. I think it's awesome.
Agreed. Lizzy, what's your best scene?
I love the scene, the entire sequence when Hank goes back to, at one point he has discovered all of these coins and then he shoves them back in. And so he makes this plan later to go back at night and retrieve all of these coins for his said exit strategy. And he's now going back to retrieve those coins. And that's like the first sign of trouble. He starts to see the shadowy figures. And that point, I remember first watching it and also rewatching it, that it's like the only time in the movie where you kind of get those like slashery, scary vibes. It's not too much of a jump scare, but you can tell that Hank is running away from something. And then eventually they end up colliding together, but you don't actually get a chance to see what's gotten him. You just know that something has attacked him. And I love that scene because it's fun to watch. I love, like, the slasher horror genre is my favorite out of the just umbrella of horror. So I love that scene because it gets my blood pumping, but I also love it because it sets this tone of, now we understand that, like, Hank is gone. Now things are going to start to snowball. And so it kind of sets the tone for the second half of the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you get so many clues of Gordon wiping the blood off his fingers and his nails, things like that. And you're thinking, oh, he's been treating this wound all the time. Maybe, but maybe it's Hank.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, you, Lizzy, stole my best scene with your best shot. But it's the one continuous shot. That is, at my heart, I like being scared, and that's the closest this movie can come to scaring me, is that scene. I think that's just perfect. It's atmospheric and terrifying. Best wardrobe or makeup moment. This is going to be an interesting one. Ellis, what's your best wardrobe?
Again, in a movie that's this subtle and understated, there's not a lot in the way of makeup or wardrobe. I do agree that the hazmat suits that they're all wearing lend a great kind of atmosphere to it. One of my favorite movies of all time is John Carpenter's The Thing. If you ever have a desire to do that one, please invite me on for it, because I love that movie. It's a shameless plug for myself. But but the way that they're always wearing this big thick parkas and everything, that these hoods that obscure their faces, it dehumanizes the characters a little bit, and it's the same vibe happens here. But particularly that last scene when Craig shows up and Gordon has grabbed Craig and wrestled him to the ground, reaches back, pulls the pipette out of the eye socket of Hank, and then jabs it into the eye socket of Craig. That is a brutal moment, and it's the one moment of real gore effects in the movie, and it's the fact that it's saved for the end right there. I think it's just really well done.
Yeah, the actor that does Craig was told to kind of pull his head up, because it is CGI for that pick, and just like jerk his head up. So that had to be an interesting direction of kind of like somebody stabbing you and pulling your eye up. Lizzy, what's your best wardrobe?
Jeff Smollett. I like Jeff Smollett a lot.
Smollett.
Jeff Smollett. I think so this was in 2001. Mullets are back. And
no, they're not.
My 4-year-old has a mullet. I'm not gonna lie, and he's so cute. Ellis can speak for it. It's a cute mullet.
It is awesome.
It is a very cute mullet, if I do say so myself.
Yeah.
But mullets, of course, were a big thing in 80s and kind of pre-2000s, but by 2001 there was something so cringy and almost like trashy about a mullet, like in those like early aughts days, like very like Joe Dirt. And so to me, like, I felt like it's so intentional to give Jeff a mullet. Like they just had to do it. They could have done any other hairstyle, but to me that kind of plays to this like childlike, like you would kind of have a mullet where he's like this kid who's probably fresh out of high school, doesn't have a lot of direction, just kind of like needs a job. He's, Gordon's doing him a favor. So to me, like the mullet just feels so intentional. And now that I'm watching it back, like kind of charming because I just love that Monroe has a mullet.
Joe Dirt also came out in 2001.
No, they're so perfect. Joe Dirte.
Mine, I'm going to see how much you guys remember. What does Mike say is the prescription after a lobotomy?
Sunglasses.
Who's the one guy that wears sunglasses?
Hank.
Yeah. And that is foreshadowing of his fate, that he gets the lobotomy.
That's right. I like that.
So I like that foreshadowing. Change one thing. Ellis, what are you changing?
I would not have all of the creepy, weird effects happen. When Mike cuts open the box with the session tapes in it, you hear Mary's doll break. You hear her scream. The generator like goes out. It's one of the only moments of overt, pseudo supernatural events that happen in the movie. It's the element that I think tips the question, what is Simon, probably most towards an entity that is like some independent thing as opposed to some phenomenon of the collective unconscious or whatever. I would have not done that. I would have not put that in there, and to leave it slightly more ambiguous as to what Simon is. I think that'd be my change one thing.
That's fair. I do like the generator going out, though. We've got to come up with some way for the generator to go out.
It's true. That's true.
Change one thing, Lizzy.
Mine's a little bit more shallow. I think there are times where the music is a little distracting, where it feels almost it's like a crossover with David Caruso, where it's kind of CSI, like towards the end of the movie, where now Gordon has come to and they're doing a pan of every body. Like every single time that you see a new body, it's like pring, and like just kind of makes these like, it's almost a little distracting. I do appreciate the purpose behind them because they want the music and the tones. They use such sharp tones because they want you to feel unsettled. But to me, I found it just a little distracting. So I could have done without it. And the tone of the movie is so subtle that I would have appreciated kind of more subtle music. But honestly, it's not enough to make me dislike it. I still think it's a spectacular film.
All right. 2 votes for more subtlety. I am going with something that just drove me nuts. It drove me nuts the first time. It drives me nuts on another viewing. Either remove the walkie-talkies altogether or actually use them. There are several instances where they're like, where's this character? Like they're hanging from your belt. Literally pick them up. Jeff at least gives us the one of, I left it in the van. He's the only one with any kind of excuse. Everybody else, they're hanging from their flipping belts, and it just drove me crazy. Just pick up your walkie-talkie. Hank, where are you? Just do that. But
that's an excellent point.
Yes, it really is a good one.
Now it's going to bother you. Right. Best quote, Ellis.
The best quote for me is there's no contest. It's, I live in the weak and the wounded, Doc.
The last line.
The last line.
Voted as one of the creepiest last lines ever.
Yeah.
Lizzy?
It's mine as well. It is. I don't think before I even saw the film again, that was what I knew was going to be my best line before I even rewatched it, because that is the line that changed everything for me. Like, this went from, as a child, that line transitioned Simon and the scariness of the film, of like almost as a warning to myself. And it just completely shook me to my core. My young, like, let's say I was like 14, like my young 14-year-old self was just completely rocked by that. So that line for me is just very powerful. Still to this day creeps me out.
Mhm.
2 for 2 on Simon. I'm going to make it 3 for 3, but I'm going to pick a different Simon line because this one to me is far more chilling. The weakness is great, but when he says, because Mary let me, Doc,
Yeah.
they always do.
They always do.
They always do. It's
So
just
scary.
So creepy even now.
the fact that he says she let him, and then just they always fall. There's an inevitability that makes me sadder than the fact that he's living in weakness.
Have you guys seen The Babadook?
Yes.
Yes.
I think that movie's really, really good, and the theme is, don't let him in. And I see the Babadook as depression and or despair. And once you let despair in, it becomes this thing that is haunting you. And I get that very similar vibe from that line, that they always let me do it, in that sense that you said, Lizzy, sin's crouching at your door. Don't let him in. Don't listen to Simon. Don't. It's this constant thing. But they always do. They always let him do it. And so,
yeah, I think of the entity from Sinister.
Yeah.
It's called the Kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Well, this has been a great movie. I'm interested to see where our ratings and recommendations are going to come. Ellis, we'll start with you. 0 to 5 stars, half-star increments. What are you giving Session 9?
So, I've had glowing praise for it the whole time, but I probably can't in good conscience give it higher than a 3.5, just because it's not. There are many better movies than this in the horror genre. I just think it's an excellent movie that people should see. I think that it does have some pacing problems. I think that I can totally understand why some people wouldn't like it. I think that there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not a perfect movie. And I think that I tempted to give it a 5 because I love it. But I think that, there's, I can't give you specific criticisms. I wouldn't really change anything. But there are other movies that I think are far more interesting and far scarier than this one. But I think it's competent and really good. And so I'd give it somewhere between a 3.5 and a 4.
Okay, excellent. That's a good rating, especially from someone that enjoys horror films. So.
Mm-hmm.
Lizzy, where'd you come in?
I'm going 4.5. I really love this movie, and the only reason why I'm not going completely 5 stars is that it's not a movie that I see myself putting into my rotation. I tend to save the 5-star movies for the ones that I can really see myself enjoying, turning on, a month from now, 2-3 months from now. But in terms of a horror movie, I mean, the objective of a horror movie is to scare you. And this movie is right up there with some, I would say that this is probably easily top 3 of the scariest movies I've ever seen, or the movie that had the biggest effect on me and truly giving me nightmares and shaking me up. So I think for that reason, I would be remiss not to at least give it that credit, because I've seen a lot, and not every single movie can shake me like that. And I just think it's such a fun movie. And then having these conversations of, so thought provoking, of what is Simon. And I think it's something that should be in every horror film fan's repertoire.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, there's always some kind of boost for me. If a movie can scare me, that's automatically at least a full star above where it would normally land. For me, I'm going to split the difference between you two. This is a 4-star for me. I really, really enjoy it. I think it's a great slow burn with a fantastic setting. I'm thrilled we got to revisit this. I hope the people that listen to this podcast, I hope you're not just listening to this. I hope you'll actually check out the movie if you haven't seen it. I hope you didn't listen to this podcast and get it all spoiled for you before you go and see it too. But this is just a fantastic movie. I'm thrilled. Thank you, Ellis, for serving this up for us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yay!
Yeah. Lizzy, your kids are going to have to get a little older before.
That's right.
Show up. Although it'd be fascinating to hear, like, how do you feel about the Paw Patrol movie?
Right. I mean, I had Wilder on when I did Millennial Movie Matchmaker. I did Disney movies, and I had Wilder on. He was probably about 4 or 5 at the time, and he just gibberish. That's all that came out of him. He was just so excited to be in front of a microphone. So yeah, they're not old enough yet, but one of these days, here's to them coming on.
All right. By that time, the Paw Patrol movie will be 10 years or older.
That's right.
Can't wait.
Right.
Well, we are going to select a movie that is 10 years or older currently. So, Lizzy, you want to help us?
Yes. So today's movie was a little bit more under the radar, but next week we're going to include some heavy hitting directors in their first feature films ever. So we've got option 1, Duel from 1971, directed by Steven Spielberg. A business commuter is pursued and terrorized by a malevolent driver of a massive tractor trailer. Option number 2, Kronos from 1993. Directed by Guillermo del Toro, a mysterious device designed to provide its owner with eternal life resurfaces after 400 years, leaving a trail of destruction in its path. And option number 3, Following, from Christopher Nolan. A young writer who follows strangers for materials meets a thief who takes him under his wing.
Well, if you get some time, check out Kronos. That's a really good one, but we've got to pick a Christopher Nolan movie. I haven't seen Following, so that's what I want to go with.
Nice.
Can't wait for that. Thank you, Ellis, for joining us.
Yes, thank you. Love you.
This was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
And thank you all the lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable. We invite you guys to reach out to us. We really want to hear from you, so please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Pandora, wherever you get them. These reviews really help us and help other people find our podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give us a like on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at movie_retro. Email us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. Producing and providing this podcast is fun, but it is not free. So we invite you to support the show at our Patreon page, patreon.com/retromovieroundtable. Any contribution is much appreciated and goes towards making the show better for you, the listeners. As always, thank you for listening. Be good to each other and watch more movies. Lizzy?
The truth is, I gave my heart away a long time ago, my whole heart, and I never really got it back.